some people and then...
Dr. Balentine, thank you for participating in this aspect of the evening tonight. We'll get right to it. And actually, just real quickly before we do so, I just wanted to jump out and say, in the year that Arizona Education Network has come together and formed and done some great things, we pride ourselves on sharing information, providing information that's factual, and that comes directly from the source. So we certainly recognize this exercise as part of that by going to you directly to the source for Amphitheater schools and providing this information as asked by our audience here this evening. First up, and there's a couple of them, so forgive me, I've clustered them, but I can assure you that the question that gets presented will cover everybody's particular question because they're all related. How does, and this is from Wilson, how does AMPI intend to implement RIFs given the new law regarding tenure?
Everyone heard the question, right? Last time it was repeating questions, but the question is how are we implementing reduction in force given the new law? Currently, it's our interpretation of the law and our board policy that since the law was passed in November approximately, our contracts with our teachers were in force prior to that. So we are planning to operate our RIF policy in terms of identifying reduction in force personnel based upon current board policy for this year.
Thank you. Next up is, what is going to be done about teachers who have already retired and are still working for AMPI? What does this process cost our district?
I'm assuming people are referring to the early retirement phase-out program. Currently, as you know, we have been phasing out an early retirement program in the district. Our current funding for that program is $1.2 million, and certainly that program is at risk at this point.
Next one up, I think it's fair to say that this is on all of our minds. I know me personally, and this question comes from Harrelson. With the state budget in such dire circumstances, what is the impact of private school tuition tax credits? I keep seeing increases in these tax credits.
Well, I don't know the total. What I do know is that there are increased legislative efforts to make that total larger. And I am familiar with some research that would indicate that those monies have not focused in the areas that they were intended, which was to recruit perhaps new students into the private system and at-risk students or students with economic need.
Next up is from an Oro Valley resident. And at the very least, I'm excited to see that people, the average audience member is aware of this, and it is a timely question. It's in the news as of late, as of now. Why is the state of Arizona not participating in the federal program Race to the Top?
Well, the state of Arizona did write an application, went through quite an extensive application writing process with some support from the Gates Foundation. It was one of 14 states that I believe the Gates Foundation funded for that Race to the Top application, and that application was submitted, approved by the governor, the superintendent of public instruction, and the president of the state board, and submitted to the U.S. Department of Education, I believe, on January the 18th. After school districts across the state had identified whether or not they were interested in participating, and the results of round one was that Arizona was not selected, and Arizona was rated very low in terms of our application.
Next up is from Wilson, and this is specific to special education. What cuts are planned for special education? And in light of these cuts, how do you intend to comply with federal mandates?
We are reviewing our special education budget very carefully. We do, as the questioner identified, there are important and critical federal mandates that we will comply with, and we're reviewing all of our suggested reductions to ensure that none of those reductions will lead us or put us at risk in that area. But they are not included tonight for that reason.
Next question comes from Wills. What is the MI district spending per student? Is it different from the Arizona average of $6,200? And how will Prop 100 passage or failure affect that number?
I'll pass it off to Scott in a second. It is different and higher than the Arizona average, roughly speaking, because small school districts have some real special laws that allow them to spend upwards of $12,000 sometimes per student. But we do have our override, and our override allows us to spend 10% above our budget control.
The data on that question is actually located on the Auditor General's website in the dollars in the classroom report. In looking at total dollars is actually misleading because there are numbers included in the calculation that make districts non-comparable. Example, they include food services numbers. So if a school district operates a breakfast program because of high Title I eligibility, it makes it look like they're spending more than another district, or a district is geographically large and is doing lots of transportation. Because of the funding formula, it creates the illusion they're spending more. It's just that the various components of how the funds work create the dissimilar numbers. And then ultimately, the formulas for how school districts are funded actually decreases as a district gets bigger. We're in the largest funding category as far as the size of districts go, so we actually get less money on a per pupil basis than a smaller district does. So, there are definitely lots of districts out there with per pupil numbers much larger than ours for various reasons.
For certain, tonight, Dr. Balentine, we have some very informed attendees tonight based on the content of some of these questions. So that's encouraging to see that folks are indeed paying attention and that they're informed. So with the extra insight that you can provide, we'll be doing a great thing this evening. The next question comes from Painted Sky. It is two parts and they're vastly different from each other. So I'll throw out the first one, you can address that, and then we'll look at the second piece. First part is, how will the proposed business tax cuts, 28% cut for businesses, affect the income from Proposition 100? If it passes, how much will it offset?
They're totally unrelated. Sales tax is what we're talking about with Proposition 100, and cuts to income taxes for both corporate or individuals is an entirely separate source of revenue. Ultimately, they do impact the state general fund, but what we're talking about for Prop 100 is sales tax revenues.
And then also the second part of this from Painted Sky is, why